Hey everybody, here we are today. We're at St. Peters Harbour's Lighthouse, and in behind me is the remnants of an old wharf. I was here just the other day and I made a complete video talking about the history of this location. Unknown to me, the information I had gathered online, the source actually had a few things incorrect. So instead of putting that video out with those imperfections in it, I decided I will completely redo this video, but I may use some of the footage from the other day. Well, as we walk and talk, I'll just mention a few things right here. This is the parking lot. We're here on a Monday. That's why you don't see any other traffic or cars out. This beach seems to be pretty quiet anyway. We're sandwiched in between two parts of Prince Edward Island National Park. There's a little bit of a peninsula over here, and that is the farthest eastern side of the park. And then we have this gap where we are now, and then continuing this way, you actually rejoin the rest of the national park. So this is what the trail kind of looks like. Also, all these dunes, they're protected. So if you're here with your dog or with kids, keep them off the dunes, because there's animals that like to nest in these dunes, and also it just degrades the bank, forces the dunes to, you know, get washed out. So just be careful when you come here and respect the nature, and that's all that they ask of you. So right here, this is the St. Peters Harbour Lighthouse, and it was constructed in the late 1800s, around 1870, and it actually used to sit at the edge of the wharf of the harbor, and you can't see any of that at all anymore. So the lighthouse itself, it was in operation until 1951. In 1951 is when they abandoned this harbor. All the boats that come in and out of St. Peters Bay actually go down to a place called Redhead. So they have a harbor there, Redhead Harbor, I believe it's called. This lighthouse, they had it as a signal light up until 2008, where they then took out the last of the lamps inside. So now this doesn't have any illumination at all. And here is St. Peters Harbour Lighthouse. This plaque is dedicated to all the founding members of the St. Peters Harbour Lighthouse and their families, whose contributions and trust made community ownership and restoration of the lighthouse possible. So if you were just here a few years ago, you would have seen this in a completely different light. It was not painted, so you didn't have any of this white or red, and it looked very gray and not as appealing at all. But I imagine they probably come by and they have to dig this out periodically just to try to keep the dune from actually coming and smothering it completely. The lighthouse, you can see where it remains of those pilings that would have been part of the wharf for the harbor. This lighthouse is right at it's right on the old breakwater, which is now under the sand. And then you would have had buildings along those pilings, and this is the way that the boats would come in. It would be able to sail here, you know, dock here, continue on out into the ocean. This right here would have been more open water, and there was actually an island out here, and the breakwater is on the island, because back then they actually had two channels. This being one channel, the main channel that was used for the harbor, and then the second channel. The history of the St. Peters Bay Harbor goes way back to prehistoric times. So we know the Mi'kmaq were the first people in this area, followed by the French in the 1720s. And in the 1700s, this harbor was actually the second largest populated place in all of Prince Edward Island. And then following after the French, you know, we had our the British, Scottish, Irish immigrants that came here, and now we have this mixture, and that's the makeup of the people who live in this area. So again, you can imagine 1951 is when they finally abandoned that harbor. So before 1951, you had a channel. Right now, I would basically be in the middle of the water, and you can see how much these dunes have grown up over that time. Down here, we're going to be joining what used to be another island, and there's a breakwater on that island as well. I'm sure over the centuries, St. Peters Bay has taken on many different shapes. And I know just down the coast a bit, you have St. Peters Pond, which is now called St. Peters Lake. And probably was very similar to St. Peters Bay at one time. And who knows, in the coming centuries, possibly we'll end up with 2 St. Peter lakes. We're just walking up on the old breakwater, which there's a lot of misinformation online. So if you see pictures online, people calling this a wharf, it's not. It is the breakwater. So this breakwater existed to keep this channel, which is now the only main channel to St. Peters Bay, open. That is where the Redhead Harbor is today, and that's where all the main ships come in and out of this harbor. So no one can use old St. Peters Wharf anymore. You see the old rocks that they had here to fill inside of the breakwater. It's cool to see the old iron rods still sticking through the old wood of the wharf. So these would have been used to, you know, fasten 2 bits of wood together to hold the wharf together. And then in the middle, you would have filled everything up with these rocks. And basically this is just to hold the rock in place for the breakwater. Then we have this as well. Hard to say what all this wood was used for. Maybe there was a walking platform out here, and since then it's all collapsed down, or maybe it was part of, I don't know, shoring up the side of the wharf itself. So now that we're done with the history lesson, we're gonna go and get in the water and swim along the old breakwater and see what kind of life we can find. We were here the other day, and it was while the tide was rising, so the current was heading into the bay. Now the current's going the opposite direction, so it'll be interesting to see what other species we see on this run compared to the swim that we did the other day. Yeah, you can see the current drifting by. Whoa, I'm attempting to swim, but the current is so strong, we might only be able to use the footage that we had the other day. Unfortunately, there's still way too much current here at the low tide, so you guys are gonna have to just watch that footage instead. It's just way too dangerous for me to try to continue, and I'm just gonna end up getting swept out. So hopefully you guys enjoy the footage. In behind me, you can see that the sun is beginning to set. So I'm gonna go in here, try to swim along what remains of the wharf underwater, and you can see there's a lot of rocks, so maybe there will be some lobsters and some crabs there. We'll have to wait and see what kind of life we find. I got Simon here with me as well today. All right, let's go. we just started out. I'm only in basically knee-deep water, and we're already finding crabs and lobster. They're just everywhere, so the further out we go, the more we'll see. But right now I can start feeling the current and a little bit of a riptide, so we're gonna try to be careful as well. So the old wooden pilings, they've disappeared into the sand dune here. So we have to go over to the other side of the sand dune. Hopefully they'll pop back up and we'll be able to continue to follow it. That flat fish right there, that's called a flounder, and there's also a little lobster hanging out around him. This here is an old oyster shell. So no oyster left inside of that. You can see just anywhere that there is a rocky bottom, there's all types of life. So they're all attracted to this amount of rock that's here. If you go further out where it's more sandy, the life is a lot more sparse. This is just ideal habitat for those baby lobsters and those little crabs and flounder. You can just see how much more life is here by the rocks compared to how barren it is over here in the sand. That lobster there, he was using his little antennas to kind of try to smell and figure out exactly what the GoPro was. There, it's our first piece of garbage. It's a little net. So we'll take that back in with us when we go. I think we're more than halfway to the end. We're starting to get into some more current here. It's cool to see those lobsters living that close together. So there, we made it to the end of the old fishing wharf, and we didn't find any large lobsters at all. So there must be a reason for that. I'm not sure what it is. But now I'm really stuck in this current now. I'm really fighting it to stay in the same position. So we're gonna start heading back now because the sun's setting and we don't want to be out here too late. That right there is a hermit crab. You might not know that we even had hermit crabs in the maritime provinces of Canada, but we do. Well, we didn't see the biggest lobster, but that there was definitely the smallest one we've seen. So we just got back out of the water. I was really happy I was able to find this piece of garbage. So, you know, we paid our cost of admission into the ocean. We brought a little bit of trash out with us. Definitely, if you're here and you want to swim along this, you're going to need flippers. It was getting really difficult the further out that we went, and if you didn't have these, you really get swept out. Also, what I've just learned, because I talked to a member of the St. Peters Harbour Lighthouse Association, he told me that this here is not an old fishing wharf. This here actually was the old breakwater. So it's always good when you find a local and you just ask them a couple questions. You never know. So thank you very much for watching, and I hope that you guys learned a little bit about the area here. And if you come here, you're just careful when you're out there swimming.